The federal funds rate is currently around 4.11%. By the end of 2026, this rate is expected to fall below 3.5%. Wall Street is excited, but middle-class Americans aren't likely to benefit much from this decline in interest rates.
Low rate and high liquidity environments benefit the guys who have money
Low
in
rate,
the
high
markets,
liquidity
benefit
environments.
the guys who already have the wealth.
Yep.
The top 0.1%, they have seen their wealth nearly double since 2020 to over $23 trillion. Stocks accounted for virtually all of that growth.
Most Americans own stocks. However, older and wealthier Americans generally own more of them than everyone else. As
They've
a
held them
result,
longer.
They
They were
benefit
cheaper.
from the asset price booms that tend to follow Fed rate cuts.
Individuals who were exposed to the private equity market, the private credit market, they've been able to just make bank.
It's really important to own financial assets. If you have all of your money sitting in a savings account, odds are after time, you're going to find yourself being stretched more and more thinly.
As the Fed gears up for a rate cut, we
No,
ask,
I didn't see the
are they
meeting.
helping or hurting the typical family?
Okay. All right. So based off of what we're most likely going to encounter here based off the introduction here. Yeah, listen, bro, the more money you have, in fact, the more the Fed rate cuts are definitely going to affect you, let's say. So if you're on the end of things where things are incredibly hard for you on a regular basis, I can imagine immediately that the Fed cutting rate cuts are not going to actually benefit you. For the most part, they're going to be to your detriment because remember that house you were saving up for, you can no longer afford it. Because as soon as they drop the rate, all of the absolute sharks are going to come out and stop buying up all of the assets. I think that's just the reality of the scenario here. And then basically based off of the rule or the law of supply and demand, that asset itself is going to grow massively in price. Then you're no longer going to be able to afford it, bro. That's the reality. So if you keep interest rates higher, less people are going to loan money. That means the asset prices are generally going to be able to stay stable for a little bit, I would say at least. So yeah, rate cuts are going to hurt the average American. Absolutely. You'll never be able to buy a house now.
The cost to borrow money will likely fall over the next year, according to the Fed's forecast.
We do have a very good sense of the direction the Fed wants to head in, and that is lower rates. If you look at the Fed projections, maybe we're looking at closer to 3% of an overnight rate in a couple of years.
Okay.
And that really sets the floor for all other interest rates.
Right,
Lowering this rate sets off a series...
I mean, that along with the 10-year treasury.
It sets the floor for all other interest rates.
Lowering this rate sets off a series of chain reactions in the economy. For example, your savings accounts may earn less money on interest after Fed rate cuts. That said, you also might pay less interest on your credit card debt. These moves also create conditions that can make it cheaper to finance cars, student loans, homes, and more.
It really is sort of a flywheel for all other economic activity. And that's why you start to see, I think, financial investors get excited for lower rates.
When you're spending a lot of money on interest costs, you're not spending it on things that are actually useful and productive. They're able to deploy that money and keep it for internal investment, capital expenditure, hiring.
But there are downsides. This process tends to lead to higher wealth inequality.
It
The
does
Fed's easing
immediately.
cycle could unintentionally widen the generational wealth gap.
It will
lifting the net worth
100%
of
do that.
retirees, baby boomers, while the 20-somethings and the 30-somethings who depend more on their wages and capital gains not benefiting as much.
We
Not
see that
benefiting
it
at
does
all.
not benefit everyone equally. If you are an Apple or any great big corporate borrower,
Oh, you're
you
good.
will see
Oh.
a difference from
Oh,
a
you're
quarter of
good.
a percentage rate cut because you've got the best borrowing costs on planet Earth, basically. So you will see that benefit. But when it comes to things like automobile loans and credit card rates and even mortgages, it takes longer for them to filter through, and it takes more of them to make a real material difference in what it costs for average American working men and women to borrow.
Yeah, bro, material costs are definitely not going to like drop anytime soon. It would be great if they actually did. It would be great, but the problem is that I think from what I've realized at least, like if you're looking to build a house itself, the materials in the house, let's say all these prices went up along with the house prices. right? Because they know what you're going to use it for, bro, right? Like like making like a small addition to your house used to probably cost maybe about $40,000 to $50,000, and now it's somewhere around 120, $200,000 to basically make a small addition to your property. And that's all in material costs because they know what you're going to utilize it for. You're basically improving an asset that's already basically sitting at the top of its bubble, guys, right? So it would be great if it was to go down, but if that went down, that means also most likely the prices of houses have gone down, and that specific asset price is already too high. So like it's already overinflated, bro. So material costs are definitely, I think, running parallel with specifically house asset prices.
Younger households are hurt most by a reduction in interest rates. That's because they own the smallest share of financial assets.
What happens when the Fed overnight rate come down? We ultimately start earning less money on cash, which makes it less attractive versus other investments. So it's really natural to think about where do we want to reallocate that capital?
Take, for example, real estate.
In a lot of markets, real estate has become, and in some cases, unaffordable.
Right.
Qualifying for a mortgage today requires a six-figure household income in most of the US. That's far above the median household income. The income requirements are higher if the buyer doesn't have a 20% down payment ready.
Right.
Compare this to conditions from 2006.
It's the
The
PMI.
median household brought in around $58,000 that year. They needed $54,000 to qualify for a mortgage.
Years of zero rates and quantitative easing drove housing prices far faster than incomes. It rewards older and cash-rich households, but it locks younger buyers out.
When compared to real estate, stocks generally require less capital and deliver higher returns over the long run.
Real estate money can be a little harder to place. I would argue that if you really want to reap the full benefit of real estate ownership, you're doing it in private markets. And that is generally a little harder for people with smaller portfolios to get into.
For these reasons, many Americans are flocking into equities like stocks.
Yeah, I think what he's talking about here is like there are multiple ways to purchase a house. I do think that the average person is just going to run to a bank and say, hey, listen, I want to get a 30-year mortgage specifically on a piece of property. But if you're looking to get into any type of like real estate investing or even purchase your own your first house, the smart thing would probably be looking into like seller finance or buyer finance, let's say. Houses and property and things like that, but that definitely would cost a lot more, I would think, in terms of the initial down payment, which is generally you can basically negotiate that along with negotiating like a balloon payment, if anything. You can negotiate all of these things while having the previous owner of the house basically float the loan, right? So you need to make sure that you are obviously qualified to do that, right? But you can definitely still purchase a house right now. It just takes a different path, let's say, than specifically running to a bank and seeing how much you can get approved for. You could generally just, again, like even on Facebook, there are like multiple seller finance and owner finance type of deals you can easily do on a regular basis that are, if not better than whatever the bank is actually offering you, bro.
2025 is on track to see a record $1.25 trillion flow into exchange-traded funds. The strength of passive investing has never been what we're witnessing right now.
Families lower on the income scale tend to have more of their wealth tied up in real estate and durable goods. The wealthiest families in the country have significantly more wealth tied up in stocks or mutual funds.
If you look at your average boomer
Dividends,
right now,
guys.
stocks have been very good for them over their lifetime. Most of the wealth in America is in that generation in stocks.
The S&P is at near all-time record highs and risk appetite is on. That pushes people from equities. It's like a waterfall. That's why private credit, private equity, alternative markets are so booming. People are looking for uncorrelated assets to hedge their risk assets. That's why you're seeing frothiness in the alternative space, frothiness in Bitcoin, in gold.
That is a direct impact of some of these zero interest rate policies, which intentionally try to raise and inflate asset values.
Wealth inequality is rising globally, much of it due to structural factors like globalization and technological change. But central bank decisions play a role too.
We've seen the Gini coefficient rise here in the United States over time. This is an economic metric that we use to look at this dispersion of wealth. It tends to be very high in developing nations and tends to be lower in developed nations.
Fed policy has been instrumental in taking the baton from what had been just educational inequality, and now it is also inequality driven by monetary policy. And the Fed has to be very careful about how much it lowers the cash income that retirees are making on $7.5 trillion of record money market funds right now. And you would never want for them to be in a position where they say, you know what, I'm not making enough on my retirement assets, getting cash off of my savings, I better sell some of my stocks.
The US central bank did more than make loans cheap during recent crises. They also bought trillions of dollars in Treasury securities, the traditionally safe investments. This makes their yields fall, which makes buying safe assets less lucrative. Experts call this process quantitative
Mainly the
easing.
10-year.
You can see the process unfold on the Fed's balance sheet. When the balance sheet increases, the Fed is spending money to support the economy.
They grew their balance sheet from $4 trillion to $7 trillion in the space of 3 months. That was the Fed injecting historical, biblical amounts of liquidity into the system to smooth the market functionality at the time because markets completely fused up. But then
Guys, that is ridiculous. Like what she's talking about basically right now is all the money that was basically printed. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and inject fake printed money into the economy to make it seem like we're actually doing something while legitimately lowering the value of your $1 bill specifically, or each dollar bill that you have in your savings account. Guys, this is ridiculous. Like, I see it. We all see it, right? But this is printed money. This is fake printed money. All right. That all this money exists, right? It still exists, even though it's going down. So that means that the dollar you had in 2016 is now worth less than it was in probably 2010, bro. Like, when this hits this, your dollar was no longer this. It's the difference between this and this, bro. Stop printing money, okay? Stop printing money. You printed so much ridiculous money that the U.S. dollar is like never going to be what it was, bro. I hear you, Jerome Powell, and the reasons why you may have decided to do something ridiculous as this here, but this was absolutely silly. All right, like this was all fake. It was not real. And now you made things worse than they were in 2010s. All right, Jerome Powell. All right, Jerome Powell. Just raise the interest rate and let people figure things out.
it kept on buying more bonds long after the financial markets had stabilized. And that is where a lot of the criticism comes from.
Fake
it's
money.
the Fed staying too long and keeping the liquidity pumping into the system for so long that it's just in the end going to benefit very few.
Right.
And the result of that was inflation,
Of course it
which
was.
disproportionately affects the lower resource population, an
Mandatory.
asset boom, which disproportionately benefits the upper
The
class
wealthy,
and
yeah.
effectively puts pressure on the young people and the lower income households.
Yep.
With the clarity of hindsight, we
Here
could
goes this
have
man.
and perhaps should have stopped asset purchases sooner. Our real-time decisions were intended to serve as insurance against downside risks.
The Fed started to reverse this process in 2022 as it
By
tightened
burning
economic
money.
conditions to fight inflation. And in the summer of 2025, they signaled that they're going to pause this tightening of the economy.
Okay.
In October, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell signaled that this tightening would end, even as inflation remained above their target rate of 2%.
There is no risk-free path. If we ease too aggressively, we could leave the inflation job unfinished and need to reverse course later to fully restore 2% inflation.
I think in both the great financial
Another
crisis
fake number.
and COVID, both scenarios, we have these zero interest rate policies. It was out of necessity, a real concern that the economic engine might grind to a halt. There are trade-offs to that. I don't foresee that even though we're cutting rates, that we're going back to zero interest rate policies, barring some, global calamity again.
Okay. The wealth disparities are not going to end anytime soon. It's not going to end at all. Pretty much based off of what we're experiencing here. If Jerome Powell is set to basically lower the interest rate, I'm not sure that's going to benefit anyone except for people who actually have money, assets, gigantic savings. They have some type of liquidity. They have, gigantic assets in terms of like stocks, or they have their money in like ETF and things like that. Like, I don't know what you think you're going to do here, Jerome Powell. You're just making things worse for people. Like when you decided to print all this ridiculously fake money, you didn't just mess up the economy in the United States of America. You messed up all the other countries that basically utilize the U.S. dollar to basically back their own currency. That's what you did here. So now notice, guys, a lot of the South American countries utilize that specific thing, right? So now what happens here? You now realize that if it affected us in a way that it has affected us in terms of the United States of America, obviously, but the economy, imagine if our dollar got worse. Imagine in a poorer country, a much poorer country that utilizes the US dollar as a backup or secondary currency compared to theirs. Imagine those people. What happens? A gigantic influx of people running to our southern border for the sole purpose of making money in the United States of America, then sending it back to their country in form of remittance. You can't be surprised that things happen the way they happen when you set everything up for it to happen the way it happened. I get it, right? You wanted the U.S. dollar to be the U.S. dollar, right? No longer backed in actual currency or actually like metal value. You wanted to get rid of these things, right? But you didn't understand that other countries utilize our currency. Guys, you didn't understand it. And by doing that, you're now forcing them into abject poverty, which then forces them to run to the countries that utilize the US dollar in the way that we utilize it. Right? Guys, it's frustrating to me, bro. Like, it's just wild, bro. I'm telling you, I strongly detest what Jerome Powell is doing. Like, I understand why Trump yelled at this man, right? But obviously, but don't yell at him too deeply, because Jerome Powell has the ability to completely wreck us financially. The fact that people are like, oh, you can bring the US dollar to the bank and they'll give you some gold. Bro, are you serious? Do you know what our dollar is backed on? The US military. That's what our dollar is backed on. That's it. That is it, bro. Our military might is what backs our US dollar. That's it, bro. And there's like nothing more than that. It's not gold. It's not anything tangible. Like, this is what the BRICS nations were trying to do, like referring to Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Like, this is what they were trying to do, bro. I'm telling you, this is what they were trying. Like, we're gonna, like, if you guys remember, like a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago or so, like gold prices and silver prices just started like shooting up out of nowhere. They just started like rising in a way that was absolutely crazy. It was because all of these countries tried to create a brand new currency that America did not have the ability to sanction. That's what they were doing, bro. So all of the value of all these like metals and things like that, precious stones and things, started shooting up through the roof, bro. It's smart of you guys to do that. Obviously, you don't. It's smart because you don't want America to basically have any type of power over you. That's cool. Do that, right? Great job. But just understand, it was never going to work, because you're only backing it off of that, and you're not like backing it off of any type of military might, bro. The way you talk about finances, maybe Britt was right. No, no, all right. She is wrong. She is wrong. Guys, do you want to watch movies with me? I never actually thought to like promote it over here, guys. But if you guys do want to watch it, guys, we have hundreds of movies, and I mean hundreds of movies that we've reacted to. You guys can come watch them with me if you want to, along with many TV shows. Currently, we're working on the show Dexter, along with Vikings, and we have a lot of series that are already completed. But if you guys do want to watch it with me, the link is in the description. Everything's available at the second tier. But of course, if that's not your thing, guys, don't worry. Right? Listen, like and subscribe.